Ladies and gentlemen, Minister McClay was very adamant the other night that one shouldn't take quite so long to do the health and safety briefing as some of the speeches that followed. So can I, for those of you who are not familiar with the place, remind you that the exit is there. There are plenty of safety wardens around to escort you out in the event of an earthquake, a fire, a medical emergency. Please wear your stickers. I think you know that the bathroom's downstairs, you know that not to smoke, and phones should be switched to silent. Is that fast, slow enough for you? Thank you. Inga mana, inga reo, inga iwi, eo rangatira maa, and if you could, I forgot to say switch phones. Tēnā katoa katoa, haere mai ki te parimata o Aotearoa, e ki te whare tawahi amahi I Aotearoa. Before I start, I would just like to convey the sad news of the passing this morning of Sir Kenneth Keith. Sir Kenneth is known to many of us as a jurist, as a member of the International Court of Justice for a number of years, from 2006 to 2015. A lawyer with vast experience both in government and as a member of the faculty of Victoria University. But for us, very importantly, he was the director of the Institute from 1972 to 1974 and president of the Institute from 2000 to 2007. His passing is a great loss. And if I could just ask you just to stand for a moment to reflect on Sir Kenneth Keith's contribution to our lives. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, a very warm welcome to all Institute members, including those who attended our AGM earlier today. And for those of you who were not there, I have great pleasure in advising that the incoming chair for the coming year is Dr. Serena Kelly. If you'd like to stand, Serena, from the University of Canterbury. Congratulations to her. In the over 90 years since the Institute was founded, she is not only the 19th president and chair of the Institute board, but is also the first woman to hold that position. And congratulations too to the incoming Vice Chair, Esther Guy-Meakin, and to new board members, Rosemary Banks and Julia MacDonald. And just to complete the picture, our new Executive Director, who's hiding somewhere, Catherine, over here, Catherine Grant Makakera, means that we have a total board and governance structure dominated by one gender. So I would think that's a cause for us to applaud. A very warm welcome to other guests here present, including our patron and former president, who is also a 19th. He was the 19th Governor-General of New Zealand, the Right Honourable Sir Anand Sachinand and Lady Sachinand. Excellencies, Heads of Mission, Acting Dean Maria Bogado, Deputy Secretary of Foreign Affairs Vangelis Taylor, so I saw a moment ago. Where are you? Oh, hiding in the back. Vangelis always likes to be hidden at the back, but he does the work from the front. All distinguished guests here tonight. As many of you know, the Institute organises meetings, conferences and other events around the country as part of its mission to foster discussion and understanding of international issues as they affect New Zealand. The annual lecture is a flagship event whereby a prominent person in New Zealand's international affairs is invited to speak to and engage with, and I hope you'll do it afterwards, engage with New Zealand Institute of International Affairs members. In the past, we've had the pleasure of addresses from senior ministers, dignitaries and international relations experts from this country and from overseas. For instance, in recent years, that's included Foreign Minister Peters, then Defence Minister Collins, then Minister of Trade and Export Growth Damien O'Connor, and the then Asia Pacific editor of the Washington Post, Anna Fifield. Tonight, it's a special pleasure to welcome and introduce the Honourable Todd McClay to deliver this year's annual lecture. As most of you know, he's the Minister of Agriculture, Forestry, Trade and Investment, and Associate Minister of Foreign Affairs. That's a pretty daunting list of key portfolios, and all highly relevant, Minister, for an audience such as this. I'm very tempted to say, welcome to Wellington. Given that your overseas travel schedule has been so punishing of late. Minister McClay has been the MP for Rotorua since 2008 and held a number of ministerial roles in the 5th National Government. He's no stranger to diplomacy, representing the Cook Islands and NZIIA to the European Union, and has wide experience in business and government relations in Europe. So as you can see, the Minister is well across the large and the small of our trade relations, the billion-dollar markets as well as the niche ones. And on the subject of the niche ones, last week at EU Day, he made mention of Witloof and endives in a speech marking Europe Day. I should just warn you, Minister, that the mayor of the commune of Flers in northern France, which has long been associated with our World War I and Anzac Day commemorations around Caterpillar Valley, is extremely keen to increase the export of endives to New Zealand. We've invited the Minister tonight to speak to us this evening in his capacity as Trade Minister, not least because of the vital linkages between trade, security and diplomacy at a time when geoeconomics are dominating the turbulent global agenda. And not just Europe. The new FTA with India is just one of the other recent developments that will impact considerably on our trading, but also on our wider relations with that country. So what's the response to all of this challenge now and in the longer term? Well, in the next 20 minutes or so, Minister McClay is going to speak, and after that I'm going to invite our two panellists to provide some comments before opening the floor as the Minister's time permits for some questions and answers. So please join me in welcoming Minister McClay to the podium.
Well, James, thank you so much. Kia ora, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. I have a prepared speech that I am going to work through because I am honoured to be invited here. But James, thanks for your very kind introduction and the welcome back to Wellington. When Anna and I, two young daughters, 11 and 13, and so we have this tradition, is when I go overseas I buy a fridge magnet for wherever I am and I bring it home, and it's become quite a little celebration. Where's the next fridge magnet come from? I put it up on the fridge. It's a nice way for them to share a little bit of some of the countries I go to. However, every time their mother goes to the fridge to open it, it reminds her just how very much I'm away. So I'm not sure when it comes to trade negotiation or strategy, I have had all the help I need from MFAT for that one. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, everybody, and thank you to the New Zealand Institute of International Affairs for the invitation to deliver this year's annual lecture. It is a real pleasure to be here. And James, those who have come before me, it really is an honour for me. Can I start by acknowledging the NZIIA patron and former Governor-General Sir Anand Sachinand and Lady Sachinand. So lovely to see you both. I saw you both last late in the evening in the Coro Lounge of the Auckland Airport when a lady came over to speak to you who had worked with you, Sir Anand, many, many years ago. And not only did he, for quite some years ago, no, actually it was the daughter of somebody that had worked with you, and not only did you remember in great detail for a long time ago, so thank you for your contribution. And I didn't come and speak to you because your family was with you, but you made that young lady feel very, very special, so just to recognise that. Can I also recognise members of the Diplomatic Corps? Thank you for your contribution and your commitment to New Zealand. It's valued and we appreciate it. Distinguished guests, also acknowledge the outgoing members of the NZIIA board, Dr. James Kimber. James, thanks for your hard work. Suzanne, the new board members, Rosemary Banks and Dr. Julia McDonald. Can I also recognise, I think we have members of the media here, and particularly want to recognise Sam sitting over there. He tells me he's sitting right at the end so he can get out and file an important story on my speech, not because it's the closest seat to the bar, Sam, but also to recognise the Honourable Damien O'Connor, former Trade Minister. Damien, thanks for the way you and I have been able to work together over the last 3 years. Trade is bipartisan in New Zealand. It may not always seem like it is. Trade is good for New Zealand, and I very much appreciate particularly your party's support of the India Free Trade Agreement. Damien knows if he sits there, it is furthest from the bar. As a former minister, it is important. The New Zealand IA has been asking hard questions about New Zealand's place in the world for over 70 years. Tonight, these questions are as relevant as at any point in that history. And I want to start with a simple observation. New Zealand is a trading nation, not in the casual sense that politicians invoke when they want to sound economic, but fundamentally and structurally. 1 in 4 jobs in this country depends on our ability to sell to the world. 1/4 of our GDP is generated offshore. We know that exporters pay higher wages at home and are more productive than domestically focused firms. We are geographically remote, domestically small and globally dependent. That is not a problem to be solved. It is the defining condition of our economic prosperity. And the system that has underwritten that economic life, the rules-based international trading order, is under more pressure than at any time since it was constructed after the Second World War. 2 developments in the past 12 months have made that pressure acute. The conflict in the Middle East that has disrupted global supply chains in ways our exporters are feeling directly. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which carries 20% of the world's daily oil supply, has driven up fuel costs and made getting products to market harder and more expensive. The ceasefire is welcome, but the situation remains fragile, and the impacts on our exporters are real. They are navigating challenges with resourcing key inputs, maintaining competitiveness in the face of rising production and distribution costs, and finding reliable routes to market. And even before that conflict, our exporters were already navigating a fundamentally changed approach to tariff policy from the US. And the US is not the only one. Just ask our dairy exporters to Canada. The major economies really are playing outside the rules with very sharp elbows. These shifts are the clearest signal yet of a broader global trend. We are moving from a world governed by shared rules to one increasingly shaped by power. For a small trading nation, that shift matters more than it does for many other countries. And I want to be clear about the stakes. Our exports rose 11.8% last year in 2025, growth that happened because Kiwi exporters are world-class and consumers will pay a premium for what we produce. This is a remarkable achievement in an extremely difficult environment. But it is not an achievement we can take for granted. It depends on continued access to markets, continued investment in relationships, and a continued commitment to the rules that provide certainty and transparency and enable our exporters to compete on a level playing field. Tonight, I want to talk about how the government is responding to that challenge. Not reactively, not defensively, but with a clear plan. Our plan has 3 parts. Shoring up and creating new rules that underpin our trade, building resilience so our exporters can weather disruption, and innovating, because in a world where the old rules are contested, New Zealand has to earn its seat at the table. For a small trading nation like New Zealand, the rules-based trading system has always mattered more to us than it does to larger economies that can apply asymmetrical bilateral leverage. Kiwis believe in fairness, and the rules deliver exactly that. They level the playing field. They give our exporters that certainty, that transparency, and the market access that no amount of diplomatic relationship building can substitute for. And it's worth remembering that despite everything, 72% of world trade still takes place under the WTO rules. The system is battered, but it is not broken. And New Zealand has a clear national interest in saving as much of the multilateral furniture as is possible. That said, we're also pragmatic. Progress at a multilateral level moves slowly, too slowly for many of our exporters, who need better and certain access right now. And that's why the government has invested heavily in free trade agreements, the bilateral and regional deals that lock in access we need and provide certainty that WTO processes alone cannot deliver. In 2025, 71% of New Zealand's exports are covered by 17 high-quality FTAs. That's not an accident. It reflects a sustained, deliberate investment in trade architecture over 25 years. And the government has moved faster and further than any that came before. The results are tangible. Since our EU FTA entered into force in May 2024, New Zealand's exports to the EU have grown by $3 billion. Our exports to the UK grew 13% in the year to December 2025, following the conclusion of the UK FTA. And our exports to the UAE, our most recent agreement to enter into force, have recorded a 33% growth following the agreement's entered into force in just 6 months alone. And we've now concluded a deal with India, the world's soon-to-be third largest economy, with 1.4 billion people, and within the next 5 years, a middle class of 700 million. That's greater than the entire population of the EU of ASEAN. And with the Gulf Cooperation Council Agreement, when it enters into force, 75% of New Zealand's exports will be covered by FTAs. These are not theoretical gains. These are binding international treaties that are building blocks of long-term prosperity for New Zealand. Shoring up trade rules is not about securing new FTAs. Equally important is investing in existing FTAs to make sure they continue to deliver for the evolving needs of our exporters. This means upgrading, expanding these FTAs. We upgrade them by negotiating new rules to meet the new issues and challenges of traders are grappling with. For example, last year, an upgrade to the negotiation for the ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand FTA was informed by the COVID shock experience and delivered outcomes which make trade of essential goods easier, more efficient during times of crisis. And we're working energetically to expand our plurilateral FTAs through accession negotiations. This brings more economies within the umbrella of FTA rules our exporters rely on and provides new preferential access, market access. The CPTPP already consists of 12 economies that represent around 16% of global GDP, and we've concluded accession negotiations with Costa Rica with an ever-growing list of countries queuing to join. And the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement is the world's biggest FTA, globally by population and total GDP, and we're working to expand it further, including important markets where New Zealand does not have FTAs, such as Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. These agreements will continue to be an essential component of New Zealand's economic resilience strategy, and will continue to prioritise the WTO, which provides the foundation for the global system of trade rules that matters so much to New Zealand. But let me be direct about the WTO. The 14th Ministerial Conference in Cameroon was deeply disappointing. And I say this as a Vice Chair of the conference and facilitator for the negotiations on reform. The absence of multilateral outcomes, extending WTO reform on the e-commerce moratorium on agriculture and fish subsidies reflected the entrenched positions of major economies unwilling to compromise. This is a real setback, and we should not pretend otherwise. But New Zealand will not walk away. We'll continue to be constructive and pragmatic brokers. We'll continue to push on agricultural trade reform, harmful fish subsidies, trade distorting industrial policies, and on digital trade rules. Because in a world shifting from rules to power, every institution we can support and every norm we can embed makes New Zealand safer. The alternative, abandoning the multilateral system, is not an option for countries like ours. And we will invest in the institution. I am delighted that 165 WTO members have endorsed the appointment of the New Zealand ambassador to Geneva to lead the WTO peak body, the General Council. Trade rules alone are not enough. Our second pillar is resilience, the ability to keep New Zealand's trade flowing when the system is under stress. I see our resilience agenda through three lenses: engagement with our exporters, diversification in our international relationships, and the unglamorous but high value and critical work of removing non-tariff barriers. When the US tariff announcements hit, we moved immediately to get real-time information to our exporters and to hear from them directly. We've been running regular, well-attended webinars since then, and MFAT's website contains 754 market intelligence reports for New Zealand traders. I've already done 5 India FTA roadshows around the country over the past few months, with more to come. Getting out, hearing from our exporters and the public, not just in Auckland or in Wellington, but across the regions, is one of the most valuable things I think we can do. It shapes our priorities and builds trust. We'll continue to prioritise this kind of engagement, particularly in the current tumultuous environment. Kiwi exporters have shown time and again that they are resourceful and they are resilient. Our job is to make sure they have the information, the access and the support they need to make the most of opportunities we've secured for them. Take, for example, an ice cream company that established in New Zealand an ASEAN plastics packaging supply chain following COVID-19. Given the low stocks, they're now exploring how cardboard could be used instead. Just one way that we can work together. The government has prioritised both investing in our partnerships and diversifying our trade relationship. This has included more international visits than any previous government in a parliamentary term to build and strengthen New Zealand's relationship with key partners. Trade missions are about opening doors for New Zealand exporters, helping them build relationships, understand markets and turn opportunities into real contracts. And the trade missions we've achieved to date have helped deliver over 200 commercial outcomes valued at more than $2 billion New Zealand dollars. And those are not just numbers, they represent new connections, new contracts, new confidence for Kiwi businesses and markets that they might not have entered alone. Our Saudi Arabia mission is a very good example of this. We unlocked 5 commercial deals worth over $100 million. The 21 businesses who came with us opened doors to premium food, technology, services, construction, and the creative industries. Those doors opened because we showed up. We invested in the relationship and we demonstrated that New Zealand is a serious partner. Our relationship with Singapore tells a similar story. New Zealand's original trade agreement with Singapore was one of our first. We've invested in the relationship over 2 decades, and that investment recently produced something genuinely new. The world's first agreement on trade and essential supplies, designated specifically to help essential goods move in times of crisis. It delivers better fuel predictability for New Zealand and food security for Singapore. And it only became possible because we had built relationships long before it was needed. Not only have we prioritised engagement with our long-standing partnerships, such as Australia and the EU, but we've also future-proofed our trade resilience through diversification, which can help open alternative markets and sources of supply. This is why we saw the China market as a good opportunity back in 2008. There was no other developed country with an FTA with China at the time. China is now New Zealand's largest export market, and the value of exports to China have soared from between $2 or $3 billion back in 2008 to around $23 billion per annum this year. Another approach we've taken to strengthen partnerships is through the leveraging of the CPTPP to establish formal dialogues with EU and ASEAN, something the PM and I prioritised in these challenging times. This provides a valued opportunity for large trade blocs, the EU and the CPTPP, for example, representing a third of global trade, to move to issues that are currently paralysed in the WTO. And our partnership with the Pacific through PACER Plus agreement are essential to the prosperity and resilience of our region. That's why our government, along with Australia, has invested 38 million New Zealand dollars in the Aid for Trade initiative to strengthen countries' trade capacity under that agreement. And we'll continue to strengthen relations with Pacific Islands, countries that have yet to join PACER Plus, as an example, including Fiji, because regional economic integration through trade makes us more resilient. Our relationships are also critical to resolving many of New Zealand's non-tariff barriers, from certification requirements, labelling rules, testing requirements, to environmental regulations. These issues all slow growth. NTBs currently affect $9 billion worth of New Zealand's exports across more than 50 markets, and this government is committed to finding solutions to them. Last year alone, we resolved NTBs affecting around $600 million worth of exports. Some examples include unlocking access to China's $200 million cosmetic and skincare market, $200 million for New Zealand, by the way, signing and implementing a Deer Velvet agreement with China, providing market growth worth almost $65 million in the year to December 2024, and expanding access to New Zealand dairy products and blueberries to Korea with $5 to $10 million and $5 million respectively. We're also progressing a new plurilateral agreement with like-minded partners to tackle NTBs in third markets cooperatively. This work does not generate headlines, but it directly affects whether Kiwi exporters can compete and how they view their access to these important countries. Our third pillar is innovation. I've heard the phrase, New Zealand needs the world to trade, but the world does not need New Zealand. That just means we have to earn our place in the world, and innovation is how we do that. New Zealand has a record of bringing trade ideas to the world that larger countries haven't yet thought of. The Digital Economy Partnership Agreement, DEPA, is a clear example. New Zealand, Singapore and Chile created the world's first standalone digital economy agreement, covering everything from business facilitation and digital trust through to AI and digital inclusion. The Republic of Korea has joined. Costa Rica and Peru are seeking membership, along with the UAE, and the agreement started as an idea from 3 small like-minded countries, and it is now shaping the architecture of global digital trade. Similarly, we're working to maximise the commercial value of Indigenous business connections through the IPECTA agreement. Our leadership in institutions like APEC and the OECD and the Small Advanced Economies Initiative has gradually found its way into the hard rules of agreements like the CPTPP. That's how small countries shape the world. We're building on that legacy with the Green Economies Partnership Agreement. Working with Chile and Singapore, GEPA will make the green transition easier for producers, exporters and investors, and position Kiwi businesses to compete in a global green economy projected to be worth $11 trillion by 2040. And through the Future of Investment and Trade Partnership, FITP, New Zealand is working with 16 like-minded trade-independent economies with global reach ranging from Norway to Rwanda to Malaysia. Our approach is to cooperate on practical solutions for supply chains, paperless trade, non-tariff barriers, and trade-distorting subsidies. This initiative came about when I got together with trade colleagues from Switzerland, Singapore, and the UAE, and we knew we needed to find a new way to support each other, reinforce the rules-based system, and work together to create new rules that give our traders more certainty. Most recently, at MC14, 11 of the FITP members released a joint statement on maintaining open and resilient supply chains given the impact of global trade, of the Middle East conflict. New Zealand and these FIT partners have committed to working together to identify disruption to trade of essential goods and exchanging information on how we will approach and mitigate these. And I'll host my fellow trade ministers from the FIT partnership at the next ministerial in Auckland later this year. This is a leadership role, and we intend to use it to find new ways to support our exporters and their jobs, incomes and productivity for New Zealand. Our goal is ambitious, to double the value of New Zealand's exports in 10 years. That requires growth in trade relationships, but it also requires growth in investment. New Zealand is well below the OECD average for foreign direct investment as a share of GDP. That gap has a direct cost on productivity and wages. That's why the government established Invest New Zealand, New Zealand's first dedicated foreign investment agency, to attract more capital to the sectors with the highest growth potential: renewable energy, technology, data infrastructure, advanced manufacturing. More capital means higher productivity. Higher productivity means better wages for New Zealanders. And we're also seeing our export base diversify in ways that are genuinely exciting. Technology, commercial services and education are growing fast. Companies like Aurora, which exports retail crime prevention software to Australia, the UK, North America, and Halter, exporting high-tech livestock management solutions globally, are proving that New Zealand innovation can compete anywhere. These are exactly the types of businesses we want to see more of in more markets with more support behind them. We also want to venture deeper into global markets that are bursting with opportunities, like in Latin America, which is fast becoming a key growth market for New Zealand exporters, with their exports to the region rising 41% since 2021. The government's already started making inroads. The Minister of Foreign Affairs led a parliamentary and large business delegation to Argentina and Brazil and Chile and Uruguay earlier this year to strengthen our partnerships, deepen our people-to-people links and boost our profile. This visit was a huge success, with a range of New Zealand exporters announcing new commercial agreements with companies in Argentina, fostering connections and growing partnerships. We're also exploring additional markets in Asia and looking very closely at opportunities in Africa. Diversification is just not an economic strategy, it is an insurance. Let me finish with this. The world New Zealand trades in today is harder and much more uncertain than the one we were trading in 5 years ago. The rules are more contested, the relationships are more complex, the disruptions are more frequent. I do not expect that to change anytime soon. But this is not a new challenge for a country like ours. New Zealand has always had to work that much harder and smarter than larger economies to secure and protect its access to markets. We've always had to be more creative, more constructive, more persistent and more present. What this government has done is bring that same mindset and more energy and more urgency to that task. That's why the government has run more trade missions than any previous administration in a parliamentary term. That's why the government has established New Zealand's first dedicated investment agency, because 400 million people around the world get 10% of their diet from New Zealand every year. Our farmers, our food producers, our tech companies, our service exporters are amongst the best in the world. They deserve a government that fights for them on the world stage and will continue to, and indeed it says here, we're not finished yet. But thankfully for you, my speeches.
Well, thank you for that masterly and very comprehensive tour d'horizon, Minister. We've invited two people who know a lot more about trade than I ever will to provide some comments tonight. First, Mark Sinclair, who is himself a former diplomat and a very active member of the Institute. But Mark has had a number of senior trade roles in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, including as chief negotiator for the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Indo-Pacific Framework, in between which he was ambassador to Japan and Mexico and New Zealand's climate change negotiator in his spare time. Mark is a trade expert in many ways and will provide some initial comment. And then after that, I'm going to ask Sarah Patterson, our second panelist, to speak. She's the director of Blue Circle Consulting and has worked on trade and primary sector issues for 20 years. She's currently the Deputy Chair of New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. She's the Chair of Interweave. She's the Director of Kiwifruit New Zealand, Land Court Farming, and Wairarapa Building Society. Do tell me sometime, Sarah, how you managed to fit all of that into a 24-hour day. But Sarah brings practical experience in trade from both a policy and commercial perspective, but tonight is going to be speaking by representing absolutely none of those organisations aforementioned. So, Mark, you first for 5 minutes or so, and then Sarah, and then we will open the floor to a Q&A for the Minister. Thank you.
Get up over there. Okay. How's that? Is that coming through? Right.
1, 2, 3.
Yep. Well, to state the obvious, we live in extraordinary times. I've been out of the system, no longer a tradie, for 18 months. But that now feels like a lifetime in the trade policy world. Amidst the turmoil, which the Minister has described for us today, the hard graft does go on. I really do want to start by offering hearty congratulations to the Minister and Vangelis and the team on the India deal. I think probably only an old tradie like me can grasp both the scale of the work that involved and the scale of the achievement that it represents. And against the predictions of some around the streets of Wellington. As it happens, it's also, I think, a great point of entry for some longer range themes that ought to be of interest to this group gathered here tonight. And some of those are things I'd like to touch on, perhaps as hooks for a deeper discussion in the question and answer session. One is the point about turbulence in the international environment. It goes much wider than the American trade policy issues that have been dominating the headlines. Second, there is the question of New Zealand trade strategy. One awkward consequence of completing the India deal is that if you set aside the small missing element of the United States, it sort of feels as if we've done most of the big ones. So there are questions, I think, that at some point will need to be discussed on what comes next. But in particular, I do think India is also an opportunity for us, an incentive to do something of a stock take, not just on this past generation of FTA negotiation, but indeed how far we've come since we embarked on this game back in 1971, 1973, as the Brits were going into the common market. And then finally, on the question of resilience amidst an environment of turmoil, some counterintuitive positives perhaps that we should remind ourselves of in what's happening and perhaps what's not happening. On India, first of all, the Minister has touched on the significance of India as a market, It's now the biggest country globally in terms of population, fastest growing big economy. We'll see it in the top 3 economies in terms of GDP much sooner than others might expect. The alternative to not being there, I think, doesn't bear thinking about, given the hungriness of our competitors. As a comment, I suspect business will plan on the basis that, as with the China FTA, actual trade will move much faster than the modelling based on current trade would suggest. More interesting, perhaps, and I don't think this has been in the headlines, is what India's own ambitions are in the trade world. I was part of a deeply obscure negotiation through 2022-2023, known as IPEF, which offered some fascinating opportunities for private conversations with senior Indian negotiators. What came out of that was a couple of things. One, that within the Indian system, as it happened in China many years earlier, there was a shift towards a recognition that trade ought to be seen not as a threat, but as a driver of development and growth. And we and others who've concluded FTAs since then with India have been beneficiaries of that. But we shouldn't for a moment imagine that that's the limit to ambitions in Delhi. These things also have geopolitical consequences, and I think there are some rather tantalising questions about why pipsqueak New Zealand and giant India might want to do as a combination, given that we've got an interesting track record of doing creative and very consequential things in terms of trade architecture, trade relationships, and the Indians clearly want to have impact and do some surprising and very large things in time. Let me leave it there, but I'd be interested to hear if the Minister wants to venture some thoughts on that, on where his Indian colleagues might want to go longer term, including potentially with the United States under different management, let's say. That got a reaction. On the turbulence question, I think the Minister sort of arrived at the same conclusion as me. This is not limited to current 2026 realities. New Zealand's economic history is dotted with episodes where terms of trade have caused enormous damage. Balance of payments crises, currency crises. We've also faced supply chain disruptions from multiple causes, oil shocks, revolutions, and the like. So this is a reality we have to deal with. The positive in all of this is the diversification point that the Minister has touched on. And I think you said we're now looking at 75%, are we, coverage with once India is in place. That is a remarkable achievement and helps underpin the continuing success of New Zealand exporters in these very challenging times. The alternatives don't bear thinking about. So it's doubly significant, I think, that we've got to that point, given that our primary exports have, throughout our history, been faced with active discrimination in the markets that we were seeking to open. I'm just about running out of time. I was going to talk about rules, but I think rather than do that, the point I would like to end on is that, notwithstanding the bad behaviour from some of the big guys that the Minister alluded to, I think it is very striking not only that New Zealand exports have remained strong, that's a tribute to the quality of the product and the energy of the exporters, but also to the fact that dire expectations notwithstanding, global trade has actually remained very robust. It was up in calendar 25 by 7.5%. Notwithstanding some of that rules to power shift that the Minister commented on, we have actually seen across the FTA universe broad stability in terms of observing the rules and the commitments that are set out in those agreements. And to top it off, we have seen a continuing appetite for developing architecture and indeed for tacking on to existing good architecture. A standout example of what that can mean in practice was this rather extraordinary gathering of CPTPP and EU and ASEAN trade ministers in Melbourne last year. Something that a generation ago I think would have been quite inconceivable, but which is enormously consequential both in terms of relationships, ability to engage and to manage issues. As a very final point, I do wonder, against the backdrop of a generation of successful negotiation of FTAs which underpin that 75% access coverage number, whether it might be time for this institute and its membership to perhaps look at an event to take stock of what we've achieved, what it means both economically and geopolitically, because it's very clear these things matter much more than revenue to exporters.
Thanks, Mark. And Catherine's already noted that one.
It's my turn now, and it's working. That's excellent. Tēnā koutou katoa. It's a great pleasure to be with you all this evening. I, over the last 10 years, have spent some time actually training people on the practicalities of trade policy, and it was always a challenge to find a topical headline in the paper or something that was illustrative of why trade mattered in our daily lives. We used to spend quite a bit of time explaining to people what tariffs were and how they worked. Suffice to say, we don't need to spend too much time on either of those things these days, because, as you know, these things are in the headlines all the time at the moment. And for our exporting businesses in New Zealand, those headlines can have something direct and immediate in terms of impact on their operations or their profitability that are changing on a day-to-day basis and make long-term decision-making incredibly difficult. Most of our exporters are very small. A lot of them have less than $5 million a year in revenue. But even those who are larger and with a lot more capability and resources can really find these times extremely challenging. So how are they responding? Some of the actions that I've seen businesses taking in recent times is really focused on trying to control what's within their control. And that might mean watching their costs very carefully, potentially deferring investments and other decisions, absorbing some of their higher freight or tariff costs in order to maintain some hard-won customer relationships or market segments. But the picture is far from all being doom and gloom. I work mainly in the primary sector, and it has been having a pretty extraordinary run of late. And that's important because it accounts for about $60 billion of our $80 billion in export revenue. And of course that translates into real on-the-ground things like jobs and also some tax revenue for the government as well. And some of my colleagues are quick to tell me, oh, that's the old economy. You know, we've got this amazing new economy. And they're quite right to be very excited about the way our economy has diversified. Looking around the room, I'm not sure how many of us are really at the vanguard of the digital transformation of our economy. Certainly not me. I have to profess I don't understand a lot of these new services that are being traded in the digital space, but they are quite phenomenal in terms of the growth in areas like gaming and agri-tech and aerospace technologies, and many of the examples that the Minister touched on in his remarks, and they give us a great deal to be optimistic about. But in terms of exporting itself, as the Minister said, it's never been easy. And in fact, you know, often uncertainty and instability have been the real enemies of growth. And so while our exporters can do everything that they can to be match fit for what comes ahead, that must sit alongside what governments can do. So while exporters are trying to navigate this changing landscape, it's the governments that can fundamentally transform it for us. And I think what we're starting to see is some really interesting and innovative ways in which governments are doing that. And New Zealand has really been a leader in thinking outside the box of ways that they can establish new areas of rules and opportunities to create that certainty and stability. And the Minister mentioned a couple. For me, the deeper agreement on the digital economy partnerships, as well as this new agreements that we've got with Singapore, are really standout examples that sort of show the way for how we can continue to develop our rules and ensure that we have that certainty. I think the FTA with India is an incredible achievement. Many years ago was involved at the early days of the China FTA, working in the red meat sector, and I had to travel around New Zealand talking to meat companies about what those opportunities were, and a lot of them were very dubious. They didn't really see that Chinese consumers would be able to afford the high quality meat products that we were exporting. I think all of you will see the irony of that today, where it's one of our absolute top red meat markets. And it just goes to show that we don't really know the future, but if we can create those openings, entrepreneurs and others will come in and fill them and make amazing things happen. And I'm absolutely sure that will be the case with India. I was very lucky to go there last year for the first time, and I visited the Azadpur wholesale fruit market in New Delhi, which, Minister, I think you've had the joyful experience of as well. The day that I was there, it was 48 degrees, which added to the sort of chaotic energy of it. It's the largest wholesale fruit and vegetable market in Asia, and it's a point of entry into the local market for a lot of New Zealand products like kiwi fruit and apples. And while they might arrive in bulk on pallets and large cartons, in no time at all, they are zooming on the back of every type of vehicle to very popular roadside fruits vendors all over the city and arrive fresh on the tables of New Delhi families. And I just think that's a staggering achievement and a supply chain like no other. And I'm sure there will be an immense amount that New Zealand will learn from being closer in our relationship to India. And I very much look forward to some of those discoveries that we will make together in partnership. I think finally, also, I'd just like to touch a little bit on the rules-based trading system, and in particular, the WTO. I'm personally quite attached to the WTO agreements. When I first joined Foreign Affairs and Trade many years ago, 1996, I was the treaty officer. Catherine Grant is laughing because her and I started on the same day. One of my first jobs as the treaty officer was to publish the WTO agreements that had just been concluded in the New Zealand Treaty Series. And I remember going to ask my boss at the time, John Adank, do I really need to include all the footnotes? And for those of you who are tradies out there, you know that that is quite a funny thing. And as a result, it was enormous. And if you look back through the treaty series, you'll find there's one giant addition, and it is those WTO agreements. And, you know, they have stood us in good stead for many decades now. And even though they are under pressure, they continue to be fundamentally important. And I just want to touch a bit on dispute settlement. It is quite an astonishing thing that we have a place where we can go where there is independent and credible consideration of disputes. Two countries can sit down, debate the facts, debate the law, come up with an answer, and this all happens in sort of sleepy rooms in Geneva in a very peaceful way and within the context of a framework of rules that we have all agreed to. And I think that's an incredible thing, and it's something that we really should hold on to. Yes, we've got issues and challenges. Yes, there's more we can do to improve that system. But we'll absolutely miss it when it's gone, and we have to absolutely do everything that we can to uphold and strengthen it. So I'll leave that as my final comment. Thanks.
Thank you both very much. I'm going to open the floor to questions now. What I'd like you to do is to put your hand up, and please wait until a microphone comes to you. First question here, but in the meantime, I'm glad you remind us that you started at the same time as our new director in Foreign Affairs. Mark and I started so it was the same day, but I'm not going to tell you what year it was.
Thank you, James. Good evening, Minister. Joshua Patterson, Country coordinator for the New Zealand Model ASEAN meeting. Now, I just wanted to quickly ask around the Singapore CSP and India FTA, and in light of that, and especially as EAS countries, East Asia Summit, does that reflect a broader shift towards ASEAN and Asia becoming central to New Zealand's future trade? And how significant is New Zealand's relationship with ASEAN countries for our long-term economic growth, and particularly in the digital economy?
It's working. Thank you so much. That was an easy question to ask. Let's see where the answer goes. The answer is yes and no. So it's very political for you, I guess. The reason for that is actually, if you look at our diversified trade strategy, New Zealand has continued to look for opportunities all around the world. Our trade agreement with China, our economic relationship, is our most important, one of our most important. We put a lot of effort into that, as we do with all other parts of the world. The problem with a speech is that you can't, with the time given, talk about the importance that we have everywhere, and therefore my apologies to countries that I might not have been able to spend the time talking about, but ultimately from a trade point of view, open access, where governments take on commitments and sign a trade agreement to take on rights and obligations and honour them, is very important to us. Does it show a shift in our direction for trade? The answer is no, but it certainly shows a shift in interest from the world and the importance of ASEAN and Southeast Asia and many countries as they grow and develop and they become confident enough to start looking outward in the world. In our foreign policy, we have an independent foreign policy, which means that we stand up for the things that are important to New Zealand and New Zealanders. We do it both openly, publicly, but most importantly, diplomatically. You think about our investment policy. The Prime Minister gave me responsible for foreign direct investment with the new agency and other things. Where investment comes from is agnostic to New Zealand. It has to be good for New Zealand. It has to meet the rules and conditions we put in place. It is, with very, very few exceptions, the same when it comes to trade. We are a country that enters into agreements to honour the rules and the commitments that we take. We have that expectation of those that we trade with, and we enter into those agreements. I certainly think you have seen a greater interest in the world as some of the Southeast Asian economies have been growing, but it doesn't show a very great big difference in direction from New Zealand trade strategy. We are New Zealand. We like trading with people. If you want to enter an agreement with us and honour the rules of that agreement, and it's high quality agreement, we'll do a deal and trade with you.
Thank you. Here, Todd.
Jody Johnston, NZIIA member from Auckland. I'm going to ask the $100 billion question. We're very good at trading logs, milk powder, and other low-value products. So the question I've got is, how do we move up the value chain to improve the value of the items we do trade?
It is a very good question, although I would caution for the people in my electorate who grow the trees that we cut down and put on trucks and send to the port and export. Those jobs are very valuable and very important to them. And in fact, there is a great desire for the fibre, food and fibre that we produce. But it is very important. We don't have the opportunity to double our value of trade by doing twice as much. We have to be smarter. And that comes to innovation. Well, secondly, innovation. Firstly, trade agreements to trade rules help with that. They level the playing field, so we have the same ability to get products with value added to them into markets. It gives New Zealanders confidence to invest. If those rules are honoured, then actually the investment and effort they put in the market will pay returns for them. By the way, you heard me say 1 in 4 jobs in New Zealand come from companies that export. Companies that export in New Zealand pay their workers more and they employ more women. It's not unique to New Zealand. It probably happens in Australia too, as many other countries. But the point here is actually when you are outward looking and you're investing, because you have to be innovative, you have to be competitive to compete internationally, then it works so very, very well. Finally, the government set we did it in the National Party in opposition as our trade policy, and then it's come through as government policy to double the value of exports over 10 years. It's the value, not the volume, and the reason for that is we need to start innovating. I gave examples of a couple of the companies that do that very well in the tech sector, from export education, from visitors coming in from parts of the world, making it easier for them to get their visas to come here to enjoy themselves. But we are already seeing some of the things that we think have been commodity in the past starting to excel and no longer be based on commodity. Our red meat exports around the world are not treated as commodity anymore. There is extra value being received by the New Zealand beef and lamb grower because of the providence story of growing in New Zealand, the reputation. The government backed that up with recently with a grass-fed standard, so that when companies go overseas and say this product you're consuming is grass-fed in New Zealand, consumers overseas know that the government stands behind that and what it means. But we are already seeing people willing to pay more, and from the point of view of I've been in China and the US and European Union, where I've had the opportunity to launch new products for New Zealand companies, no longer just beef that turns up to be turned into a hamburger. The actual hamburger is made in New Zealand and sent there, and the return they get is exceptional compared to what it used to be when we would merely send lamb carcasses around the world to the UK and otherwise. So the bit of that is to answer your question, we have to be looking at value. It comes from innovation and backing smart ideas. If they are not underpinned by rules, and rules that are respected and honoured, it's very hard for New Zealanders to go up the value chain.
Last question here, please. Just while the microphone's coming, can I say that the division bells will ring shortly to summon the minister back to work and not us to the bar. But
if you could keep me here so I don't have to go back to work, thank you so much.
Noted. Hi, I'm Ramola Duncan, a member of NZIIA Wellington. Minister Todd, you mentioned briefly about PACER Plus proposal. So where do you see the biggest opportunities for deeper Pacific collaboration beyond aid, particularly in the standards, infrastructure, and skills world?
Yeah, it's very good. I don't like the word aid. We should call it development assistance, because aid is something that, is a concept of decades ago, and it doesn't show respect to our partners that we work very closely with. New Zealand, as with Australia, but I speak for New Zealand, values the Pacific Island nations as our equals, and we have a responsibility with them to help grow their economies. You do that through trade, but trade is not fairly balanced in any part of the world. A lot of my speech was about how challenging it is for a small nation like New Zealand to compete on the world stage, even more so for smaller Pacific Island nations. So PACER Plus, actually I was the minister that concluded and signed it and took a conscious decision to say those countries that are ready, let's go ahead with it. Others that aren't, you can follow when you're ready. It's quite unusual for a trade agreement. Generally, you keep negotiating and force somebody to come to the table, but that's not the way that actually we should help these economies to develop. The reason I say it as a development agreement, there are components of PACER Plus that help develop skills or working through phytosanitary issues in countries so they can have access to markets, just not in New Zealand, Australia, but more than that. A very important part of it as we tried to work through was, how we train people that you need in those economies, from construction to fishing to all sorts of things like that, not to merely come to New Zealand to work and stay here, but to gain the skills, education, the skills on the ground to take them home and grow the economy. So the answer is greater, not greater integration, but greater engagement and involvement. I've been talking with Fiji now for a year or two about maybe them coming to start negotiating. There are very many good reasons why they should, but we should do that when they are ready. But it would be a good thing for Fiji to negotiate with us and to join, because it will allow us, constructively together to continue to work through the parts of their economy that need help and assistance, so that they can go out and sell to the world, not just to us.
Thank you, Minister.
Do we have time for one more? Because we have another front row, and she waited so. And also the bell's going to ring in a minute.
Minister, thank you so much. Your fridge magnet anecdote, I think tells the story of just how busy you've been over this term.
We had to buy a bigger fridge.
Yeah. And it's been filled with inking deals. I mean, it's been a term of really new frontiers, securing India and so on. if you were to cast ahead to the next term, is it a term focused on protecting and maintaining rules and structure, or how would you think about the 3 years to come?
Well, there are still more trade deals to do out there. There are still more opportunities to go out and improve the agreements we've got and or to find new ones. Parts of the world will grow. I'm very interested in Africa. I don't think it's an easy place for New Zealanders to trade or African nations with us, but it's worth thinking about and putting effort into. The FIT partnership has African countries in it. We now have an opportunity to sit at the table and talk about trade rules. We're cooperating with countries we may see once every few years the WTO and not have a lot of reason to have bilateral meetings and to talk. They're all coming here to New Zealand. Some of them have never visited before. Don't know what comes out of it, but isn't it great that we can have these conversations from a mutually respectful place? So there's more deals to do. But when we announced our policy of doubling the value of trade over 10 years, I also said we should judge our success of New Zealand's trade policy as much by how much extra we export as a number of trade deals that we do. You know, when the UK agreement entered into force a year later, 30 or 40% of two-way trade was still outside of the agreement. It's New Zealand and British companies not realising that there were trade preferences. That's not their fault, it's not ours, it's but our job to educate and to tell them. So there is much more we can do with our trade agreements. New Zealand has an and strategy. We want to trade with China and America and the European Union and Singapore and Japan and Korea and the CPTPP and the Middle East. I'm going on because I don't want to miss anybody. It's an and strategy. It's not an instead of. And that's how we grow our economy. We create resilience. And then we allow New Zealand companies, we show them the respect to make decisions for themselves as to where they want to put their effort and how they judge for themselves. Risk of disruption, risk of economies that are growing and so on. We help them, we back them, but they have to do that themselves. That's very much the reason that we are so pleased to have a trade agreement with India. It opens up opportunity for New Zealanders to make decisions for themselves. So the next 3 years, I think you see us going out and doing more to grow relationships with existing partners that we trade with that are very important to us and helping New Zealanders to do more. By the way, I've talked a lot about trade, about exporting. It is two-way. Our trade agreements give opportunities to New Zealanders through competition and more choice consumers than they would if we were putting up tariffs and closing down borders or putting up barriers. With that comes investment. It allows supply chains to grow. If you look at where New Zealanders get source product from all around the world to add value mixed with what we do very well to re-export, it wasn't possible a few decades ago. I think the next 3 to 5 years can be exceptional for New Zealand businesses as long as we remain open. We talk about the benefits of trade agreements and rules, and we keep doing what we do very, very well. We honour our commitments.
Thank you, Minister. The Minister's indicated that he's happy to answer some more questions over a glass of wine in a moment. So do take the opportunity to do it. But I'd just like to call on Dr. Serena Kelly to move a vote of thanks to you, Minister.
I was just going to say, as you walk up, you would have seen me on my phone. I apologise for that. I got a message from home for the children that like the thing saying somebody was meant to order our dinner. So I was ordering Sal's Pizza whilst I was listening to everything you said. That's how you get a trade deal, being able to multitask like some of the best female trade negotiators in the world.
On that note, just on behalf of the Institute, I want to thank you, Honourable Todd McClay and Mark and Sarah, of course, for coming along and, addressing us on this important occasion of our AGM and also our annual speech. So I guess the thing that I took away from that was the optimism and the positivity in a time of uncertainty, and also it was heartening to hear about that investment in relationships for New Zealand. So thank you very much for that. I've got some other people who I have to thank as well. So it's the events team, especially Aisling, the AV team, especially Aidan at Parliament, Catherine Jeffcoat for help taking photos, which is there taking some photos, and our amazing student volunteers from the Wellington branch, Jack, Hannah, Ryan, Chris and Lily. And also from the Institute ourselves, so we've got Yvonne, I can't see Yvonne here, but always thank you to Yvonne, she keeps us all going, and Catherine Grant Makakira, who's made an amazing start. She jumped in and swam straight away, so we really appreciate that. And of course our outgoing board members, very sad to say this, but to Suze Jessup, we'll miss you on the board and your vibrancy and of course all your expertise. And then Dr. James Kemba, who I'm sure we are all aware of. He's been with the Institute for 50 years. I haven't got the exact, how many more? Have I got it wrong? No? Yep. And of course, he was so welcoming to me when I first started coming to Wellington, but it's not just that, he's just got so much institutional expertise, and it's just been really valuable working with him over the last few years. So it was a lot to thank, and I apologise. After our round of applause, of course, help yourself to the bar, and I think there's going to be some snacks as well, so we'll enjoy having some more informal chats now. Thank you.